Hey there! Ready to dive into something you've been really digging into? Meditation. But, and here's the twist, across different religions.
Yeah, this is going to be fascinating.
We're talking Hinduism, Buddhism, and even Christianity. You sent over some really interesting research, and it got me thinking, we often just throw the word meditation around like it's one thing, but...
Oh, absolutely not. It's way more diverse than most people realize.
Right. There's got to be more to it.
Comparing these traditions, it's like, think of tasting exotic spices. Each one has its own distinct flavor, and together, they paint a much more vibrant picture of how humans seek, well, the sacred.
I love that analogy. Okay, so let's lay the groundwork here. You mentioned some research.
Right. The research paper you shared, a comparative study of meditation in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Christian biblical teachings by Joshua Fangarosh Nanasekar, really digs into these fascinating differences.
That's the one. And I have to admit, when I first saw the title, the phrase logical reliability kind of jumped out at me.
Interesting. How so?
Well, it seems kind of strange to, apply logic to something as personal and spiritual as meditation.
I see what you mean. It's a good point, and it really gets to the heart of what makes this research so fascinating. Each of these traditions has unique beliefs about, well, everything. The self, the divine, the very nature of reality, and those beliefs shape what meditation is and what it aims to achieve.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So exploring the logic of a tradition's meditation practices really means understanding those foundational beliefs that underpin it. It's a bit of detective work, in a way.
Love it. Uncovering those hidden connections. So let's dive into the first tradition, Hinduism. The paper explains that the core idea in Hinduism is realizing your oneness with Brahman. For someone totally new to this, how would you explain Brahman?
Okay, imagine a vast, interconnected energy, like the source of everything in the universe is Brahman. It's not a separate God figure, but more like a universal consciousness that, permeates all of existence. Hinduism basically suggests that we, as individuals, are like sparks of this Brahman.
We're all connected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, we kind of forget this fundamental truth.
So it's like we're all part of this giant cosmic energy field, but we're going around thinking we're these separate beings.
It's exactly.
Wow. No wonder meditation is so important in Hinduism. It's like trying to remember something you've always known, but somehow forgotten.
Exactly. And that forgetting, that illusion of separation from Brahman, is what Hinduism calls Maya. Imagine seeing the world through a distorted lens. Well, Maya is that distortion. Meditation, in this context, is about polishing that lens so you can see reality clearly, free from that illusion.
Okay, I think I'm starting to understand. So it's not just about relaxation or clearing your mind. It's about shifting your entire perception of reality, remembering that you're part of something much larger than yourself. That must be where the idea of merging with the universe comes in, right?
Precisely. Hindu meditation is less about emptying your mind and more about aligning your very being with the cosmic dance of existence.
Whoa, I like that.
Think of it like the mantra Om that's often used in meditation. It's not just a sound. It's said to be the vibration of the universe itself.
Really?
So by chanting Om, you're trying to resonate with that cosmic frequency, to merge with that universal energy.
It's like trying to tune a radio to the universe's frequency. Okay, that's pretty cool. I'm starting to see why meditation in Hinduism is so much more than just a relaxation technique. It's this deeply philosophical practice rooted in this idea of interconnectedness with everything. There's another concept the paper mentions, moksha. It's about liberation from this cycle of rebirth, right?
That's right. And understanding moksha, well, it's crucial because it ties back to Maya, that illusion of separation we were talking about. You see, Hinduism proposes that as long as we're bound by Maya, by this sense of being, separate selves, we remain trapped in this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
It's like we're stuck on a roller coaster we can't get off.
Exactly.
So moksha is about breaking free from that ride altogether. But then here's a question that pops into my mind. If we're all just expressions of Brahman, does that mean our individual actions don't even matter?
That's a great question. It's something a lot of people grapple with. And it's where things get even more interesting. Hinduism doesn't necessarily say our actions don't matter. Instead, it encourages us to view them from the perspective of our interconnectedness with everything else. Yeah. It's less about judging actions as inherently good or bad, and more about understanding their consequences within, the grand tapestry of existence.
Okay, so less about being a good person in the traditional sense, and more about aligning your actions with the understanding that we're all connected. Yeah. That's definitely a different way of looking at things.
And that shift in perspective is a huge part of what Hindu meditation aims to cultivate. It's about gradually shedding those layers of illusion of Maya so we can act from a place of greater wisdom and, well, understanding of our true nature.
It's like that quote, what is it? Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's the same actions, but the motivation and understanding behind them have completely transformed.
I love that.
Right.
And that transformation, that shift in perspective, is something Buddhism also emphasizes, but in its own unique way.
Okay, so tell me more about the Buddhist perspective.
Well, while Hinduism focuses on merging with the vastness of Brahman, Buddhism takes a different approach. It asks us to consider the possibility that this self we cling to so tightly might not even exist in the way we think it does.
You're talking about the idea of no self, or anatta, right? The paper really dives into this concept, and it's honestly a bit mind-boggling.
It definitely challenges our conventional understanding of who we are. Think of it this way. We tend to think of ourselves as like these stable, unchanging entities. But Buddhism suggests that what we perceive as our self is actually more like a flowing river, constantly changing, a collection of thoughts, feelings, and sensations that, arise and pass away.
It's like that saying, you are not your thoughts. But Buddhism takes it a step further and says, you're not even the you having those thoughts. It's a lot to wrap your head around. So how does meditation, like in Buddhism, how does it help us understand this idea of no self?
One of the key practices in Buddhism is the Vipassana meditation. And it's about observing your thoughts, feelings, and sensations without judgment, kind of like, watching clouds drift by in the sky.
Vipassana, okay. What is it actually like to just sit and observe your thoughts without getting carried away? Do you just end up thinking about your grocery list or that embarrassing thing you said 5 years ago?
Well, you've got to remember, everyone's experience with meditation is different.
Right.
Some days will be calmer than others. The point of Vipassana isn't to stop thinking altogether.
Right.
That's pretty much, impossible. It's about noticing those thoughts, acknowledging them, but not getting, swept away by them.
So it's about creating some space between you and the constant chatter of your mind. It sounds like a way to become more aware of those automatic patterns and thought loops we all get stuck in.
Exactly. And as you become more aware of those patterns, you start to see how impermanent and interconnected everything is, which leads to a deeper understanding of anatta, the idea of no self. You realize that these thoughts and feelings, they aren't you in the way you might have thought.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense now. It's not about erasing your personality or becoming some emotionless robot.
No, not at all.
It's about gaining a different perspective on your inner world.
Exactly, right.
But how does this concept of no self tie into the whole goal of Buddhism achieving enlightenment or nirvana?
Well, that's where the Four Noble Truths come in. They provide a framework for understanding suffering and the path to liberation.
And speaking of suffering, I remember reading in the research paper that Buddhism sees suffering as an inherent part of life. It's not something to be avoided, but rather something to be understood and ultimately transcended.
Exactly. The First Noble Truth states that suffering, or dukkha in Pali, is a fundamental part of existence. But the good news is that Buddhism also offers a way out of suffering, a path to liberation.
And that's where the other three noble truths come in, right? They kind of lay out the causes of suffering, the possibility of ending suffering, and the path to achieve that liberation. So how does meditation fit into all of this?
Meditation is like the training ground, the practice that helps you cultivate the qualities you need to walk the path, qualities like mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom.
So by practicing meditation, particularly practices like Vipassana, you're essentially chipping away at the illusions and attachments that create suffering in the first place. It's like you're rewiring your brain to experience the world differently, less attached to the idea of a fixed self, and therefore less bound to the suffering that comes with that attachment.
Precisely. And that brings us to nirvana. It's not some, blissful afterlife you go to after you die. It's a state of being, a state of liberation from suffering that's possible to experience here and now.
Okay, so less about harps and clouds, more about a profound inner peace and freedom that arises from, understanding the true nature of reality.
Yes, exactly.
Got it. Speaking of different perspectives on reality, I'm curious to see how Christian meditation compares to what we've explored so far. It seems like Hinduism and Buddhism both emphasize letting go of the illusion of separation in Hinduism and the illusion of a fixed self in Buddhism. Does Christianity offer a similar approach, or is it something else entirely?
That's a great observation. And you're right to point out the emphasis on letting go in Eastern traditions. Christianity, however, offers, well, a different flavor, so to speak. While those traditions often focus on emptying the mind, Christian meditation is more about filling it with a connection to the divine.
Interesting. So instead of letting go, it's about like leaning into that relationship with God.
Exactly. And that relationship is central to understanding Christian meditation. It's not just about achieving a state of, like, blissful emptiness or even merging with a universal consciousness. It's about communing with a personal God who loves and values you as an individual.
So it's less about seeking a state of like no self and more about, deepening your connection with a higher self, maybe.
That's a really fascinating distinction.
What are some of like the actual ways people practice Christian meditation?
Well, a lot of the practices kind of revolve around prayer and reflection on Scripture.
Okay, so like actually reading the Bible.
Yeah. For example, the paper mentions the verse Joshua 1.8.
Oh, right. I remember that one.
It says, "Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it."
Yeah.
So it's not just about, like, passively reading, but, actively engaging with the text, contemplating its meaning, and applying it to your life.
So it's more about, really taking the time to digest and connect with the words.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you were to try like Christian meditation, what scriptures or like ideas would you focus on to feel that sense of connection? Would you choose a psalm, a parable, or maybe like a passage about love or forgiveness? It feels very, personal and intentional.
It is. And that personal connection, it's emphasized by the belief that humans are created in God's image.
Yeah.
The concept of imago Dei.
Right. Imago Dei. Okay.
So by connecting with God through meditation, you're not, trying to dissolve your identity, but to refine it, to become more like the blueprint you were created from.
That's such a powerful idea. It's not about emptying yourself, but about filling yourself with something meaningful, something that helps you become like a better version of yourself. It reminds me of that quote by St. Augustine, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you."
Oh, that's a good one.
It's like that longing for connection, it's woven into our very being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this idea of transformation is really central to Christianity. Unlike the cyclical view of karma in, like, Eastern religions, Christianity focuses on the concept of sin and redemption. It acknowledges, like, a fundamental brokenness in the human condition, and it offers a path to, healing and wholeness through a relationship with God.
So while Buddhism encourages us to find peace by letting go of the self, Christianity offers like a different path to inner peace. One rooted in embracing our true selves, our, flaws and all, and seeking redemption through a loving God.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. And that difference in perspective, that focus on redemption and transformation, it really shapes the entire Christian experience, including how they approach meditation. It's not just about achieving a temporary state of peace or detachment, but about seeking lasting change, about becoming more Christ-like in thought, word, and deed.
It's amazing to see how these three traditions, while seemingly similar on the surface, practices of stillness and reflection offer such different paths and perspectives on the whole human experience.
It's really quite remarkable.
We've got Hinduism's focus on merging with the universe, Buddhism's emphasis on dissolving the self, and Christianity's call to connect with a personal God. It really highlights how our beliefs shape not only our practices, but also our understanding of the world and our place in it.
It makes you realize how important it is to, really examine those beliefs and find what resonates with you on the deepest level.
And ultimately, it comes down to a question of resonance, right?
Exactly.
Which path feels most like authentic to your own values and aspirations? Which one speaks to the deepest longings of your heart?
Those are the questions.
Right. That's something I really hope listeners will sit with after this deep dive. There's no right or wrong answer here. What matters is that, we've given you a framework for understanding these different approaches to meditation. If you've only ever thought of meditation as one thing, this exploration, hopefully it's opened your eyes to a whole world of possibilities.
And maybe even sparked a curiosity to, explore your own chosen form of meditation even more deeply. The insights and growth that await are, they're well worth the journey.
I couldn't agree more. Until next time, keep asking those big questions, keep exploring, and, keep diving deep.